Welcome to Overwatch, and welcome to a competitive match. Now, a new patch is here. I'm going to be doing a patch rundown fairly soon, but I wanted to do this one first. This is going to be talking about the new competitive mode. So you can see on the screen in the backwards, you can see two teams going against each other. This is going to be on Nepal. Now, what's interesting about the competitive mode is it's introduced a new set of rules to the game. So on King of the Hill, for example, you'll see it's a best out of 5 instead of a best out of 3, and you'll play on random maps. Basically, it will run through like 1, 2, 3, and then it will go 1, 2, 3 again, but it'll do it in random order, so you don't get like 1, 1, 2, or anything like that. It will go through all 3, and then it will start going through all 3 again.
We all have our jobs to do.
But the interesting thing especially is on payload as well. So in payload and on on Capture Point, or 2 Capture Point rather, it's got a new sudden death rule set. I might show another match later on of that rule set, but it's kind of an interesting one. I want to just explain it and then talk about what I like about it, and then talk about what I don't like about it, because there is a few problems right now going into the game. So the way it works is that when you draw, basically when one team wins and then the other team wins, so you play attack and then you swap and then the other team plays attack. And if both teams win or complete it, or both teams fail to complete it, you enter what's called sudden death, which is you play a single point of King of the Hill. So you'll play one of the random King of the Hill maps, so it's one of 9 maps, and then whoever wins that wins the series. Now, the problem with that is pretty serious. In the standard way of doing payload, and the way that we've been doing payload in the competitive community, is with a system called stopwatch, where basically the team that pushes the fastest wins, and it uses all the checkpoints as reference. So if a team completes the map, but completes it faster than the enemy team, they win. If a team reaches checkpoint 2 and then fails to get further, but then the enemy team reaches checkpoint 2 and does it faster, they win. So it's all about, how fast can you go, how fast can you push, how far can you push in relevance to the checkpoints. Now, stopwatch has a few problems from a spectator point of view and just from a playstyle point of view. So what can happen in spectator quite a lot is the situation where a team will be trying to, say, capture the first point on Numbani, and let's say the first team's already done its attack, and they set a time of about 5 minutes. And then they swap, and then so the team attacking now takes ages and ages and ages to capture that first point on Numbani. It takes them so long, in fact, that even if they push the payload all the way at maximum speed, they wouldn't be able to make it to the end. That's what we call a mathematical loss. They don't have enough time in the game to push the payload from start to finish and win the game. When that happens, and when it's a spectator event, it's really boring, because what happens is the teams just say GG to each other, and then the match ends, basically. And we end up with a situation where we either let the team push just to see play of the game, so they push to the end, and then we can see play of the game, and then we wrap up. Or we finish the match there, and we all go back to lobby, and it's really boring. And this can happen quite a lot in payload. You have situations also where it's just not even close, or you have situations where it's unintuitive on who's winning and who's losing at any given time and how well they're doing. It's hard to judge that. But the thing that's nice about payload is it rewards a team that plays very well, it rewards a team for basically having a very efficient and effective attack, and it rewards a team for just outplaying the enemy team. Like, you get this sort of gradated way of measuring team performance. With this right now, the way it works right now, I misunderstood it when I first heard about it, because the way it works right now is actually really annoying. So on payload, the way it works is, it's only if you win or lose. It doesn't matter how many checkpoints you get, it's only if you win or lose. So if Team A completes the map in 2 minutes and just has this amazing time, they complete the map in 2 minutes. It's insane, it's crazy, just complete stomp. And the other team completes it in 9 minutes 59 seconds, you still go to sudden death. Like, there's no difference between that. Also, if a team only gets to, like, if a team fails to take, say, the first point on Hanamura, and then you swap, and then you take the first point on Hanamura, you still have to play out, and you still have to win the entire map. So even if you get another checkpoint on them, whether it's a control point or a checkpoint on the payload maps, it doesn't matter. It's actually not relevant. The only thing that matters is if you win or lose the map. And that's very frustrating, because technically you've beaten what they've done. You've already won. You beat out what their performance was. They couldn't capture first point. You can capture first point. Therefore, by competitive rules, normally you would have won, just because you've done better than what they've managed already. As it is now, it just tends to all come down to this final point.
Nice idea. Shield was awesome. Thank you.
As someone compliments me in the background. Nice. It's always nice when people do that. King of the Hill works fine, by the way. I like the best of 5 system as well, more than the best of 3. King of the Hill is actually one of the more exciting modes. It's also very exciting to watch, and in the competitive community we've just found it's a really good map mode, and I'd like to see more maps. I'd like to see a few balance changes to the maps. There's just things where it can snowball a bit heavily on some of these maps, and things like as well you can get very penned into your spawn. I would like some mechanics in this game where it's just a little bit more one-sided, so, you know, if you're trying to push into enemy territory, you've got more than the spawns making it one-sided against you. They have just a better position, they might have one-sided windows, one-sided doors, that kind of thing. As it is right now, the biggest change I want in this competitive matchmaking mode is simple. It's make checkpoints matter, make the first point matter for control point, and have that be a decider. So if one team fails to capture point 1 and the other team succeeds, that team should win. Like that should be it. That's GG. Team wins, it's got further, it's done better. That's what matters. The fact that right now it doesn't matter is infuriating, because you take the first point and then they can stall you out on the second point and like force you to a tie, even though you've technically already done better than them. That's very unsatisfying, that's very kind of disappointing almost, and you feel a little bit cheated and a little bit robbed. Now what I'd also like is something a little bit... I'd like to experiment with seeing ways of making the sudden death not as binary. Basically not make it a clean slate sudden death. So you're not basically deciding matches on stopwatch, you're still going to have the sudden death, but the sudden death is going to be augmented by the performance in the match. This sounds complicated, this sounds really complicated. What I mean basically is if you as a team completely and utterly roll the enemy team and just stomp them out and completely demolish them, and set a 1 minute 30 time that's just crazy and insane, you pushed constantly or whatever, you set a 2 minute time. If the enemy team then sets a 9 minute 59 time, maybe augment the King of the Hill at the end to give one team an advantage. Basically, they perform better, therefore they have an advantage in the sudden death. It's not just coming down to this single round where everyone starts off and the relevance to the previous match is just completely void. Like, the previous match doesn't factor in at all. What I would like is some form of advantage based on your performance in the match before relative to the enemy team that will give you some feeling that the match before actually mattered. Because one thing that I'm noticing now, and I really agree with this opinion, I first heard Too Easy, a member of Reunited, comment on this. He's a really intelligent bloke, like I watch him talk about things, he seems to understand the game pretty well. So I like watching Too Easy talk about stuff, and he was the first one that really cottoned onto this, and I absolutely agree. Right now in competitive, if you give teams 10 minutes to push, they'll basically push every single match. The win rate, like the victory rate for the attacking team in competitive is incredibly high. And if you give them the full 10 minutes, it'll probably be just nutso. We're talking like 80-90% to 10%, 20%-ish. It'll be that kind of ratio. Which basically means almost every match, 80% of matches are going to be determined by this one King of the Hill point, in which case you start asking, what's the point of playing the payload? If everything comes down to the King of the Hill, why not just have a best of 7, best of 5 King of the Hill instead? So this is why I like the previous matches to impact the sudden death, have some sort of bearing on what happens in the sudden death, even if it makes it feel like, oh, the payload map or the control point map is just setting up what happens in sudden death. It's still better than just having everything obliterated and everything washed away and feeling really cheated because your attack was like 3 times as efficient as theirs and 3 times as effective, and then suddenly you get to sudden death and then people will suddenly have a brain fart, people pick 2 Widowmakers, 2 Bastions or whatever, and you lose. That's just my thought on it. That's my thought on it so far. Let's talk about the ladder system as well, while I still have a good 10 minutes to ramble on. So right now the ladder works. It's similar to a mixture of basically StarCraft and Hearthstone, which is kind of interesting. So the way it works is you have tiers. You have, I think it's 4 tiers. I'll actually pause the video and let me double check this just to make sure I'm giving you all the right information. One moment. So I've just double checked it for you. So there are there's 5 tiers technically. There's Challenger, Advanced, Expert, and Master. So, you instantly get put into Advanced, which is apparently better than Challenger. Like, I don't have a fondness. It's like the fact that Counter-Strike starts at Silver. Surely there's something wrong with that. But anyway, sure, okay, well no, it doesn't really matter what they're called. Each tier has within it 5 divisions. So basically you have the 4 tiers and then 5 subdivisions in each tier. So you'll have Challenger 1, Challenger 2, Challenger 3, Challenger 4, Challenger 5, and then you'll roll on and be in Advanced. Advanced 1, Advanced 2, 3, 4, 5, so on, so on, so on, so on. The way that they've designed it is so that Challenger, you do not lose any points when leveling. Think of it as like 25 to 20 in Hearthstone if you play that, for example. I think Heroes of the Storm uses a similar system as well, where it's just basically like you aren't punished for losing in that, and you'll just slowly, the idea I think is just an introduction where you'll just slowly and naturally roll out of Challenger and move into Advanced. So eventually anyone can climb out of Challenger unless their win rate is literally 0%. Now, one interesting fact is you cannot drop down from a tier. So let's say if you're an Expert Division 1, so that's the third tier, but you're in the first division, and let's say you lose, you will not then drop down into Advanced 5. You'll stay in Expert 1. This causes problems to my mind, but I'll go into that a little bit later. There's a few details to it that make it less of a problem, I guess. Now, finally, there is it's not Master tier, it's Heroic tier they call it, which is the highest tier. So you roll from Master Division 5 to Heroic tier. What Heroic is it's like Grandmaster in Hearthstone. It's also like, I can't remember what it was called in StarCraft 2. It might have been Grandmaster in StarCraft 2, I think it was. And that's basically, you'll get actual ranking, so you'll get a number ranking compared to everyone else in that tier, in Heroic tier. So it's where basically all the pro games are going to end up, basically, and they're just going to be competing off against each other. Now, the interesting thing about that, and what they've said and what Jeff said, is they want to try having regular ladder resets. So every so often, and they said a month, which is very alarming because I think they're going to need way longer than a month for meaningful separation to happen in this system. But within a month, like, let's just go with that for now because that's what Jeff said. Then a month later, they'll reset it and the ladder resets. And then everyone starts from Challenger again, and then they'll crawl up and play in the ladder. Now, the flaw that I mentioned before, where you can't drop tiers, is you end up in a situation where I think it's in League of Legends, for example, where it might be Diamond, it might be Gold. It might actually be Platinum. I think it goes Gold, Platinum, Diamond. In Platinum tier, I think it is. It might be in Platinum tier, it might be in Diamond, but apparently I think from there you can't drop down back into Gold, for example. And so what happens is you get this really weird curve. Like, if you imagine skill on a graph, the idea is that as you go up tiers, the skill rises on the graph. I'm not actually going to draw the graph, just imagine it. I'm a scientist, I'm sorry, I imagine things in graphs. But what you'll actually get is you'll get a dip when you move from the top of, let's say, Advanced into Division 1 Expert. Because everyone who's managed to luck their way into Expert, or boosted into Expert by friends, or is an Expert but doesn't quite deserve to be there, shall we say, is going to end up in Expert 1, and they're going to be stuck there, unable to drop back into Advanced, which might be a better place for them, but because they can't drop down, you're just going to have this weird sort of drop in skill. It's also going to be where, like, leavers are, where people who are just uncooperative are. It's sort of the big problem. Also, you can see in the match in the background, the big problem we had here is the Mei on their team was doing a really good job of just blocking us off with the wall constantly, and this person's saying group up, group up, group up, but every time we've done that, the Mei's just cut our team in half, and it's just been super frustrating. Like, that Mei was just obliterating us on that one. Very frustrating. Also, yeah, we're having problems with, like, the DPS not being able to kill people, and this is a regular problem right now. Just because the ladder's kind of all over the place right now with skill levels. Anyway, getting distracted. Final thing I want to cover, because I think I've explained how the tiers and divisions work. So basically, you know, you're going to work your way up through the divisions, and you're going to work your way up through the tiers, as long as you're getting better and better and better, until you hit Heroic, and then in Heroic, you can actually drop out of Heroic, I think, to Master. Let me just double check that. I've got the thing open. Heroic has no divisions. Every player reaches Heroic, has a unique numeric rank, which won't be in the beta. And they might... I think you can drop out of Heroic. You should be able to drop out of Heroic. It should be like a limited slots thing if it works like Grandmaster. And that's actually quite nice. I quite like that system. Just on the resets as well, they really need to be longer than a month. It needs to be like 3 months. It needs to be like a full season of play, and then the ladder resets, and then everyone can sort of scramble back up to the top. If it's just 1 month, you end up with the Hearthstone problem, where reaching Legendary is just more a matter of who is willing to grind that out. And let me put it this way. Teams that are playing are not going to be interested in trying to grind to Heroic tier. Like, the top players are not going to be interested in grinding to Heroic tier on the ladder, when they can be scrimming with each other, playing in houses against each other, playing in this sort of more structured, refined way of playing trying to force them to try and grind up the ladder is going to be a nightmare, and means that the top of the ladder is not going to be representative of the top players, and that to me is a problem. Like, the top of the ladder should represent the top players in the game. And I'm aware I'm probably talking fast on a couple of these things. It's because it's a complicated issue of how to sort matchmaking, and the next thing I'm going to talk about makes it even more complicated, which is how to deal with stacks. Because right now there is no limit on how many people you can queue with. You can queue up as 6 people, you can queue up as 0 people. And trust me, as someone who frequently plays at like 2 or 3 AM in EU, it's a nightmare when you go up against 6 people from pro teams. Now this might be slightly less of a problem when more people get into the beta. They can try and matchmake groups against groups better. So if you're in a 6 stack, then it can try and shove you against other 6 stacks. Or if you're in a 2 stack and then someone else is in a 2 stack, they might jam you all together and put you in a team. Then they can try and sort of mitigate it by just trying to stack you together. Because what they don't want to do, and this, I think, like, you know, somewhere in Blizzard HQ is this document that has, I don't know, core design principles. And I think one of the core design principles for Overwatch is they do not want to discourage you from playing with your friends. Like, that's one of the last things they ever want to do, is to make it suboptimal to basically queue in a group. We've had this problem before on the beta where, you know, stacks have been on the ladder and they've just, well, on the unranked ladder now, and have been just dominating the top of the field, and it gets really frustrating for everyone not in that stack, basically. It's just a massive pain in the ass, and you're doomed the moment they start trying to play. And what they said before was that, you know, they had it weighted to where 6 stacks were very highly weighted, so those people basically stopped queuing with each other because they'd never get matches. And then they sort of thought, well, that's not really what we want to encourage. So to me, there's probably some design decision somewhere that, you know, they do not want to discourage people playing a stack. Ideally, there would be a big enough player base to support like a team queue, and you'd form a team, and the team would have a name and a logo, and it would look awesome on the UI for esports and stuff, and that would be amazing. I would absolutely love something like that. I think similar exists for Dota 2, for Counter-Strike, so that would be amazing if they could do that. I would love that so much. So that's ideal if if the game does take off in a big way, and I'm hoping it does. I really hope it does. There's definitely a good opportunity for it to do so. It's a solid game. It's very, very fun. But, you know, if the game's big enough to support a full team queue, that will be the way forward to me. Otherwise, I'd say limit groups to 3 people, just because 4 starts to get very overwhelming. 3 is kind of good enough. That and personal bias, I guess. I like playing in a 3, so yeah, that's just me probably. Oh, I'm watching the game in the background while I'm talking, by the way, and this was also a nightmare. I was basically playing Zarya, and it's just like, the only person who I can bubble is Martin Creek on this far, and he's not a bad player as Martin Creek. Like, I've played a few matches with him, and he's not too bad. But we also have this Hanzo who seems very unreliable, a bit wishy-washy, and oh god, it was so frustrating. It was just like, give me someone to bubble, give me someone to charge up, we can stand on the point and I can fight them all. But the enemy team also just played a lot better than us, in my opinion, as a team. They were working as a group a lot better, they were sort of syncing with each other's ultimates a lot better, they were putting their team together better, and they deserve to take this map from us basically as a result. And I'm trying my best, I'm trying my little heart out on Zarya. Like, I play a lot of Zarya, so she's the character I feel I can carry the most on. Anyway, so yeah, this whole groups issue is kind of a problem. The thing is, like, the moment you allow people to duo, then that's already an advantage. A trio is going to be a big advantage. When you get to 4, 5, or 6, and 6 especially, is just going to be insanely stronger than what you could have otherwise. Other than that, I think that's about it. I mean, there's sort of the specifics. So right now, for example, win and loss is binary in terms of how many points you earn in the ranking system. So each division is 100 points. Each win gives you 20 points, each loss gives you 20 points. Which I think is kind of a very naive system and won't really sort that well, because it rewards consistent winning, but it doesn't weight it properly, where, you know, if you get a match against a team that's ranked a lot higher than you, surely then losing to them is expected, and therefore you should lose fewer points. You know, it's like just a proper MMR system, basically, like an ELO system that we're all familiar with, where it weights, you know, how good is the expected ELO of the enemy team compared to your team, and then weighting from there to figure out, okay, well, how do we do it? How many points do we deduct from you? Are you expected to win this? Are you expected to lose this? If you beat a team that you weren't expecting to beat, then surely that should be rated higher. So on, so on, so on, so on. Like, I'd rather have a system like that. Other points I'd like to talk about, just in terms of competitive. Right now, like I said, I'd really like that change to have a system where it rewards a team for playing well and getting a good time. So this is actually, I like the competitive King of the Hill, by the way. I like having it be a best of 5. It feels a lot less random. Basically, just the more games you play, the more you can differentiate the teams off from each other. But yeah, it's like, I'd like to have it where it doesn't feel pointless to play the payload map. Because I've had games now where it's literally been a case of, okay, sod it, we'll stop playing this, just let them push to the end, and then we just have 10 minutes to push, because it doesn't matter how far we get as long as we push to the end, and we can probably do it in 10 minutes. You know, I've had matches where that's literally been said, because it just doesn't feel worth it to, you know, tilt and go nuts on each other in this very futile defense where their team is very clearly stronger than ours and is pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. We've already sort of thrown in the hat and said, sod it, we'll push to the end and then win on King of the Hill. And that's frustrating. That shouldn't happen, basically. And there's too many opportunities to try and force it to King of the Hill right now. So if you try and get rid of that somewhat, then that will be better. One thing they've also said that Jeff also mentioned, I think he mentioned it in an interview. He mentioned it in an interview on Chairman V's show. I think it's called The Overview. He did an interview there talking about the system, where this system was first unveiled. And he said something very interesting that I'm super curious about as an idea, which is changing maps a little bit, tweaking map balance a bit, dependent on division. I kind of like that idea. I actually kind of really like that idea. I mean, one thing that's kind of happening right now is the pro community and the casual community are kind of at odds, because ultimates generate so fast for competitive players that it kind of feels a bit nutso. Now you can change settings in a custom game, the ultimate charge rate. And the pro community, like ultimates, and geez, that's such a good trace alt. You could see it's literally stuck to the barrier, and I knew at that moment, well, I can't move out of my team in time, and we're just done. Like, that was a horrible feeling. Really good bomb though, really nice bomb. Distracted again. Sorry, I like watching Overwatch. I like talking about watching Overwatch get played. And also, we're on the same map, by the way, and they have the same Mei, I think it is, who's just cutting our team in half over and over and over and over and over. But yeah, ultimates generate so fast in the competitive match that's part of why control point maps are kind of impossible. 2 control point maps, rather, are impossible on the competitive side of things, because you have so many attempts to take just 2 control points that it's just kind of inevitable. Because you can do it so reliably, because you have so long to do it, because you can generate so many ultimates and then just generate wombo combos off the back of it, you can just push and win. And I think I whistled there as well, so this is probably going to be lovely to listen to.
We need the last tank.
So having a change in ultimate generation rate across the divisions, maybe, I don't know, changing map balance, changing how maps work, would be kind of interesting as an idea, because what we don't want to do, and there's this very sort of conscious effort by the community, because a lot of the community does come from games like Team Fortress 2. One of the problems with Team Fortress 2 as a competitive game, in terms of the popularity of it, was that the pro scene and the way that the game is played professionally was radically different from how Johnny Average would play it. Whereas in other games like Counter-Strike, like League of Legends, the differences aren't so huge that the game looks totally unfamiliar. And the game looks totally, you know, out there and different and weird. And what we want to do is have the game be as similar as possible. So having, you know, balance changes made according to the skill level of players across the competitive thing could be an interesting idea to explore. And it doesn't even have to be anything major. It could just be something as simple as change it to alt rates or things like that. Maybe just time limits, for example, changed as well. That kind of thing could be kind of interesting. Anyway, match has finished. Unfortunately, we did lose that one, but I'll also let it play out at the end of score screen. I think I included it. I was tempted to sort of go out and record another bunch of games. I have won since several times now. I'm slowly climbing my way out of Challenger. It does take a long time to do, as I said, because you just earn 20 points. You do earn more points for consecutive wins. So if you are winning consistently, and oh no, I didn't leave the post-game screen in. I think it's because I was slightly tilted. I think I did leave it in on a previous video, so maybe I can show it there. If not, I'll go out and record one and then render this afterwards. But yeah, we want it to be as similar as possible. And we want it to be the same as possible. So if Blizzard are already considering experimenting with changing the game dependent on skill level, I'd be curious to see that explored. Anyway, thanks for watching to the end. I've been Josh, it's One Voice Amongst Many. I've talked my arse off about competitive and the rank ladder and how that works, my thoughts on it so far. Toodles.